Over 4 million Hyundai and Kia engines have been recalled or covered under extended warranties for one common pattern of failure. Most of them break somewhere between 80,000 and 110,000 miles. There's a thread connecting every single one of them. And it isn't bad driving. It isn't skipped maintenance from people who never opened the hood. A lot of these owners did everything the manual told them to do. They followed the oil change interval printed in the owner's book. They used the grade of oil the dealer recommended. And around 90,000 miles, somewhere on a highway or in a grocery store parking lot, the engine knocked twice and went silent. That's the story we need to unpack tonight. Because if you drive one of these cars, the next 10 minutes might be the most important 10 minutes you spend on it this year. The engines we're talking about belong to a family Hyundai and Kia called the Theta II. It powers a long list of vehicles people actually bought. The 2.0-liter turbo version sits under the hood of Sonatas, Optimus, Sportages, and the Santa Fe Sport. The 2.4-liter naturally aspirated version went into even more of them, including base Sonatas, Optimus, Sorrentos, and Santa Fe's from roughly 2011 through 2019. So if you parked a Kia or a Hyundai in your driveway in the last 15 years, there's a real chance you're sitting on one of these motors. And the failure pattern is consistent enough that mechanics now hear the symptom and finish your sentence before you can describe it. What that failure sounds like matters because it doesn't usually arrive without warning. Most owners report a deep, hollow knock from somewhere under the valve cover at cold start. Not a tap, not a tick. A heavier sound, almost like somebody loosely tapping the block with the back of a wrench from the inside. It's loudest in the first 30 seconds after you crank the engine. It gets quieter as the oil warms up and the bearings swell into their clearances. Some people drive like that for weeks. Some drive like that for months. And then one day, usually under load, usually merging or climbing a hill, the engine locks up and the car coasts to the shoulder. That's the moment the repair bill becomes a new car decision. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't a quiet pattern that nobody's noticed. This is one of the most heavily documented engine failures of the last decade. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the federal body that tracks these things, opened multiple investigations into Theta II failures, including stall events, engine fires, and the bearing failures themselves. Recall documents acknowledge a specific manufacturing issue. Class action records show owners across multiple states pursued claims that ultimately resulted in extended warranty programs covering the long block on many affected vehicles. So the existence of the problem isn't disputed by the manufacturer. The dispute is over who pays when they pay, and how an owner proves their specific failure fits the covered pattern. We'll get to that. But for now, understand that you're not chasing a rumor. You're looking at a story written into official paperwork. To understand why these engines die at 90,000 miles, you have to picture what's happening inside the bottom end of the motor when it's running. The crankshaft sits at the base of the engine, spinning thousands of times per minute. The connecting rods bolt the crankshaft through bearings, which are thin curved shells of soft metal. Those bearings never actually touch the crankshaft when everything is healthy. They float on a microscopic film of pressurized oil about the thickness of a human hair, supplied through tiny passages called oil galleries, drilled through the block and the crank itself. Think of those galleries as the plumbing system of a house, and the bearings as the shower heads at the end of the pipes. As long as water reaches the shower head at full pressure, everything works. The second the pipe clogs or the pressure drops, the shower head runs dry and burns. Now, according to the recall language Hyundai and Kia filed with regulators, debris generated during the manufacturing process of these specific engines may have remained inside those oil galleries. We're not talking about visible chunks of metal. We're talking about fine particles, the kind of leftover machining residue that should have been flushed out at the factory, but in some cases wasn't fully cleared. Imagine the plumbers in our house analogy left a handful of sand inside the pipes when they sealed them up. For the first few years, water still flows. The sand isn't blocking anything. But over time, it slowly migrates. It settles in the elbows. And one morning, you turn on the shower and nothing comes out. That's the mechanism the recall describes for these connecting rod bearings. The Theta II's specific weakness sits in a phrase you'll see in the documentation over and over: oil starvation. The number 2 and number 3 connecting rod bearings, the ones in the middle of the crankshaft, are typically the first to fail because they're the farthest from the oil pump and the most dependent on perfect gallery flow. When debris narrows those passages, the oil film thins. The bearing starts to wear. As it wears, it sheds tiny flakes of soft bearing metal into the oil, which then circulate and contaminate the rest of the engine. Pull a magnetic drain plug on a failing Theta II, and you'll often see a copper sheen on the magnet like somebody dipped it in bronze paint. That's bearing material on its way out. Mechanics treat that sheen as a death sentence in slow motion. Wait until you hear what the manufacturer's response looked like. Rather than tear down every engine in the field, which would have been economically impossible, Hyundai and Kia rolled out something called The knock sensor detection system update, often shortened to KSDS. It's a software flash applied at the dealership that reprograms the engine control unit to listen in real time for the specific vibration signature of a spun connecting rod bearing. The car's existing knock sensor, which normally listens for a detonation in the combustion chamber, gets a second job. It becomes an early warning system for bottom-end failure. If the software detects the characteristic frequency of bearing damage, it triggers a check engine. Light limits engine power, and creates a service record that documents the failure inside the warranty window. Now, this part will make you listen to your engine at cold start tomorrow. KSDS doesn't prevent the bearing from failing. It can't. It's just code. What it does is give the owner and the dealer evidence on paper that the bearing started knocking before the engine outright seized. That distinction matters enormously when the question becomes whether the extended warranty covers your engine, or whether some adjuster decides the failure was caused by neglected oil changes. If KSDS flagged your car, you have documentation. If it didn't, you're often arguing from a weaker position. So step one for anyone driving one of these vehicles is simple. Call a Kia or Hyundai dealer, give them your VIN, and ask whether the KSDS update has been applied to your specific car. If it hasn't, ask for it. The update itself is free under the program. The peace of mind, if you're sitting at 90,000 miles, is worth the phone call. But the recall debris is only half the story. The other half is what every Theta II owner does, or doesn't do, after they take delivery of the car. And this is the oil mistake the title promises to explain. Open the owner's manual for one of these vehicles, and you'll see an oil change interval listed at around 7,500 miles under normal conditions, sometimes longer. That number assumes a healthy engine running on full synthetic oil, driven mostly on highways in moderate climates. For most actual owners, that's not the life their car lives. They commute short trips, they sit in traffic, they tow occasionally, they run errands across town in winter, and many of them, especially in the early ownership years, ran conventional oil instead of full synthetic, because that's what the quick lube tech put in when they pulled into the bay. Here's why that matters for an engine that already has questionable oil gallery flow. Conventional mineral-based motor oil, what mechanics call dyno oil, breaks down faster under heat than full synthetic. As it ages, it forms tiny carbon deposits and varnish, the same way old cooking oil turns brown and sticky if you leave it in the pan. In a healthy engine, with wide, clean galleries, that varnish doesn't cause much trouble for a long time. In a Theta II that may already have manufacturing debris narrowing those passages, varnish is the second sand pour into the pipes. It builds on top of the existing restriction. It thickens the oil at exactly the cold start moment when bearings are most vulnerable. And over thousands of miles it can contribute to the gradual oil starvation pattern the recall describes. Pay attention to this number, bearings. See the worst conditions of their life in the first 10 to 15 seconds after you turn the key on a cold morning. Most of the engine wear you'll ever accumulate happens in those few seconds, every single time you start the car, because oil pressure hasn't fully built and the oil film hasn't fully formed. If your oil is thick with age and varnish, it takes longer to reach those critical bearings. If those bearings are already running on thinner than ideal clearance because of debris-restricted galleries, the gap between safe and damaging is razor thin. That's the convergence the recall and the class action filings point at. Manufacturing residue plus extended oil change, intervals plus low-grade oil, equals the 90,000 mile failure curve we've all seen in the data. You can hear it when it starts. You can sometimes smell it too. Owners who've lived through a Theta II failure describe a faint, sharp odor, almost metallic, coming from the breather hose or the oil cap. That's the burnt metal smell of bearing dust passing through the crankcase ventilation system. It's subtle. You won't catch it in a parking lot. You catch it when you pop the hood after a hot drive and lean in close. If you ever notice it, that's not a coincidence. That's metal where there shouldn't be metal. Most people don't know this, but the way Hyundai and Kia originally framed the recall is worth reading on its own. The official language attributes the bearing failures to debris that may have remained in the engine from the manufacturing process, specifically tied to certain production windows and certain plants. The remedy, in many cases, was either an inspection and engine replacement if a knock was confirmed, or the KSDS software update plus an extended warranty. On the long block, typically out to 120,000 miles or 10 years from the original sale date, depending on the vehicle and the specific program. That extended warranty is the most valuable piece of paper most owners don't know they have. It's not automatic in every case. You usually have to be the registered owner, the vehicle has to be eligible by VIN, and the failure has to be documented. But it exists, and it has covered tens of thousands of engines. Independent analysis, performed by aftermarket engine builders who've torn down dozens of failed Theta II motors, generally agrees with the manufacturing debris hypothesis, but adds more layers. Builders report seeing scoring patterns on the connecting rod journals consistent with momentary oil starvation, even on engines that were never reported low on oil. They report bearing wear patterns that don't always match what you'd expect from neglected maintenance, suggesting the failures begin internally, where the owner can't see them and progress quietly until the noise starts. Several builders have also pointed to oil pump output and oil pickup screen design as contributing factors, particularly when the pickup screen begins to collect bearing material shed earlier in the failure cycle. None of this contradicts the recall. It just paints a fuller picture of an engine that's running on a smaller margin of safety than most owners realize, and that's not even the worst part. The hardest pill for some Theta II owners has been timing. Some failed just before the extended warranty kicked in. Some failed just after the mileage cap. Some had service records that didn't fully prove every oil change because they used independent shops or family driveways instead of dealers, and they ran into friction trying to get coverage approved. Class action settlements addressed parts of this. Goodwill repairs covered some of the rest. But not every owner walked away whole. That's the financial side of a mechanical problem. And it's why the safest move today is preventive, not reactive. You want to never need to make the warranty argument in the first place. So let's talk about what to actually do this week if you own one of these cars. If you have a 2011 through 2019 Kia or Hyundai with a 2.0 or 2.4 Theta II engine, your action list looks like this. If you don't already know whether the KSDS software update has been applied to your VIN, call the dealer and ask, because that one update may be the difference between a documented bearing failure and an undocumented one. If your car is still within the extended warranty mileage and time window for your specific vehicle, keep every oil change receipt in writing with mileage and date, because that paper trail may be required to access coverage later. And if you've been stretching oil change intervals to 7,500 or 10,000 miles on conventional oil, this is the week to stop. Evidence suggests that for an engine with a Theta II's known vulnerabilities, a shorter oil change interval on full synthetic is the most defensible maintenance posture. Most independent technicians who specialize in these engines recommend changing the oil every 3,500 to 4,500 miles using a quality full synthetic in the manufacturer specified viscosity, typically 5W20 or 5W30 depending on the year and trim. That's shorter than the manual. It costs more per year. It's also the cheapest insurance you can buy against a repair bill that, out of pocket, runs into the thousands. If you tow, if you idle a lot, if you do mostly short trips, lean toward the shorter end of that range. If you start your car tomorrow morning and you hear a deeper knock in the first 30 seconds that quiets down as the engine warms, do not assume it'll work itself out. Some owners report that knock disappearing for weeks and then returning louder. Get the car to a dealer while the noise is still happening, because diagnosis is far easier with the sound present than from a description after the fact. If the KSDS system has flagged a code, that's a documentation event you want recorded immediately, not days later. And if you've ever pulled a magnetic drain plug and seen that telltale copper sheen, treat it the same way you'd treat a lump you found in your own body. It needs a professional opinion, not a guess from somebody in a forum. If you're outside the extended warranty window and your engine fails, your decision tree gets harder. A long block replacement on a Theta II outside of warranty can cost more than the resale value of the vehicle in some cases. Some owners opt for a remanufactured short block. Some opt for a used engine with verified mileage. Some opt to sell the vehicle as is and move on. Each of those paths has trade-offs, and none of them are emergencies you want. To make under pressure on the side of a highway, better to know your position before the noise starts. There's one more thing worth saying. The Theta II isn't a uniquely bad engine in the absolute sense. Millions of them have run past 200,000 miles with no issues. Whether yours becomes one of those depends on factors you can't always control, like which production batch built it, and factors you absolutely can control, like the oil you put in it and the intervals at which you change it. The owners who've had the best outcomes with these engines tend to share a profile. They run full synthetic, they change it often, they paid attention to recalls and applied every software update. They kept their receipts, they listened to the engine at cold start every single time. And when something sounded off, they didn't wait. You don't need to be a mechanic to do any of that. You just need to take the problem seriously enough to add it to your routine. A 5-minute call to the dealer for a VIN check, a switch from conventional oil to synthetic at your next change, a shorter interval on the next service sticker, a habit of cracking your window when you start the car in the morning so you can actually hear what it sounds like. That's the playbook. It's not glamorous, it's just consistent. And consistency is what the Theta II rewards more than almost any engine on the road today. Seriously, start your car cold this weekend and listen for a knock under the valve cover. If you know somebody with a Sorento, Sportage, Optima, or Santa Fe in this generation, send them this video. Subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up on extended warranty coverage.